So Nintendo just announced a brand new Paper Mario game called Paper Mario Color Splash. And you know what that means, it's time to dig up the old analysis machine to uncover whatever secrets the Nintendo Direct footage might be hiding. And by the way, we're not just looking at the North American footage, but Japan's and Europe's too. And let me tell you, there is a lot here. So we better crank the analysis machine up to 11. And with that, let's get started. So right off the bat, we can tell that the game is really running with a paper theme more than ever before. In fact, this game isn't so much Paper Mario as it is construction Paper Mario, as the entire world appears to be draped with it. You can actually see the added depth that construction paper brings, with alternating strips layered on the ground to represent the grass, or the slightly raised circles on the path here. And if you look close enough, you can even see the texture of the construction paper itself. It's pretty impressive. And what's particularly cool is that the objects built from it look like actual papercraft, reminiscent of the recent Mario & Luigi game. Everything has a loosely thrown together look to it, such as how the seams of the question block here don't quite line up. And when Mario pops it open, you can even see the tab inside that held it shut. This is even more obvious with the nearby tree, which has a visible gap on top, and of course the obvious punch-out leaves. Yeah, never before has something so shoddily built looked so good. But interestingly, that tree also demonstrates that not everything is built out of just construction paper. Because if we take a look at the base of the trunk, we can see it's actually made from thick cardboard. And this goes for the wall behind it too, as well as the very ground that Mario is walking on. In fact, all the major buildings and structures seem to be built with cardboard as a base, with the construction paper serving as decoration, such as with the floor tiles in town. You can even see them peeling up a little bit in the corners. And that paper look really does extend to the entire world. Even the water has a papery texture to it. Oh, and the moving clouds above are clearly suspended by wires. The art style even extends to the world map, which gradually fills in with color as you unlock new areas. And as you do, the landmarks actually pop up out of the ground, like a pop-up book. And that's a pretty neat touch. Hell, even the speech bubbles have a paper-like appearance to them. Yeah, they're really going all out here. And that paper look isn't just for show, because this time there are parts of the world that are blank and uncolored. In fact, Nintendo even explained that this new land, being Prism Island, is being drained of its color, and Mario will have to fill in the missing spots with his brand new paint hammer. Though that's kind of a weird thing to be painting with, right? Come on Mario, did you really forget how to use a paintbrush already? At any rate, we can see the paint hammer used throughout the trailer to fill in colors missing from all kinds of things. Whether it's a blank spot on the ground, a flower, a bush, a bench, a house, or even toads themselves. And it seems that whenever Mario fills something in, he'll earn some kind of reward, like coins or cards. Plus the fact that the thing he painted gets restored too, like with the toads that come back to life. However, it appears that Mario can't just paint willy-nilly because of a paint meter in the top left corner, which consists of 3 colors, red, blue, and yellow, which are, of course, the 3 primary colors from which all other colors can be made. And we can see that each time Mario fills something in, the paint for the specific colors used drops in the meter. So the blue flower here depletes blue ink. Similarly, the green bush here depletes yellow and blue. Now interestingly, it seems that the size of the object doesn't affect the amount of paint used much, if at all. Like the house here, which doesn't appear to consume much paint. And the house here also demonstrates that the colors aren't always split evenly, such as how more red is consumed than yellow, which does make sense given the specific shade of orange here. Now you may have also noticed that there's something else below the paint meter, and in this scene it says max 100, and we think that might be a measurement of the total amount of paint that Mario can carry, particularly as, in a later scene, we can see the limit's been increased from 100 to 150. This, combined with the fact that the game tracks all 3 paint colors individually, strongly suggests that managing how much paint you have will be an important part of the game. Especially because paint appears to play an essential role in battles too. Now at first, the battles might appear to be pretty similar to Sticker Star, in that your actions appear to be limited to items you found while exploring. Now in Sticker Star's case, that was stickers, but this time around you use cards instead. Yep, the very same cards that Mario found earlier for painting different objects. And to be fair, the cards do appear to work almost exactly the same as stickers, with one big exception, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Okay, so the cards you have available are displayed on the gamepad, and as the voiceover explains, you'll select one to start the battle. But just choosing a card isn't enough, as you'll first have to paint it to make it usable. And helpfully, the game actually displays the amount of ink it will cost before you choose to fill it in. You can see the amount of ink it will take is actually blinking, which in this case is mostly yellow with some red mixed in. And even after you paint it in, it seems like the game may still allow you to undo your action with the clear button here. And once you've painted it in, you can then slide off the gamepad and onto the TV into battle. Unfortunately, the North American footage doesn't show what happens next, but thankfully the European one does. Mario will then attack the selected enemy using the action on the card, which in this case is a hammer attack. Now in the European Direct, we only got to see the end result, but the Japanese one actually shows the entire thing, and it reveals that attacks still have the action commands of past Paper Mario games, as we can see a positive message appear after Mario winds up, which translates to excellent going off the European footage. And as you probably know, nailing the timing results in a more powerful attack, which in this case not only destroys the first enemy, but produces a shockwave big enough that reaches the second enemy too, which also destroys them this time around. Now before I continue, I wanted to point out that the voiceover for the Nintendo Direct specifically states that this entire sequence is how you start a battle, But we're pretty confident that, in actuality, this is how every one of your turns in battle will work. Because in the European footage, we can see that as soon as the player selects the attack, the remaining cards in Mario's hand slide back into view, which only makes sense if they will be used for subsequent attacks. So knowing this, it seems that battles will be a balancing act of managing not just your cards, but your paint levels too. So for example, if you run out of yellow ink, you presumably won't be able to use a hammer card at all since it requires a large amount of it. Unless, that is, you've already painted it in beforehand. Because check this out. If we take a look at the rest of the player's hand in the European version, we can see that while most of the cards are unpainted, 2 of them actually are, being the mushrooms. Now it is possible that mushrooms just come this way. After all, they almost certainly refill Mario's health, so it might be a bit rough if you needed to use one but couldn't afford it. However, we also notice that even after you paint a card in, you can still tap the back button here to put it back in your hand and choose another card. And that's probably how the painted mushrooms got back into Mario's hand. And speaking of those other cards, let's take a quick look at what's all on display here, in all 3 versions of the footage. Okay, so we already know what the hammer does, but what about the hammer with a bandage on it? Well, if Sticker Star is anything to go by, which it probably is, it's the same basic hammer attack, only weaker. Next, we have a shoe card, which is almost certainly the jump attack from Sticker Star. And like with the bandage hammer, the rundown shoe card here is just a weaker jump, as confirmed earlier when Mario found a ×3 version of that card. Now if we go to the Japanese footage, we can see a card with what appears to be a spring on it, which again, thanks to Sticker Star, we know is probably the Hop Slipper card, which allows you to bounce on a single enemy up to 10 times in a row. And finally, there's a special fan card which unleashes a powerful attack that in this case destroys all 3 enemies at once. It's pretty handy, and also looks similar to the Thing stickers from Sticker Star. So now that we know what the cards do, that does bring up one major question. Why cards, instead of, say, the stickers from Sticker Star? After all, both do seem to be extremely similar. Well, we think we may have the answer, but fair warning, there's a lot of conjecture here. Okay, so did you notice how Mario's holding his cards up almost as if he's playing an actual card game? We have a sneaking suspicion that the battles in Color Splash may play similar to an actual card game. And based on that, we may actually have a better idea about how the battle system is going to work than it seems at first glance. Okay, so let me explain. So in the footage, we only see Mario holding 10 cards at max, which is quite a bit fewer than the pages and pages of stickers accessible to you in Sticker Star at any given time. Now granted, we have no idea 10 cards is a true limit, but we wouldn't be surprised because Sticker Star's huge amount of options really drag down the pace of each battle, so limiting the amount of options available to you would help streamline things a lot. Regardless, 10 cards won't exactly go very far in a prolonged battle. After all, that's only 10 turns. But, like an actual card game, we think it's possible new cards might be dealt to Mario at some point during the battle, such as between turns. Although we should mention that in the North American footage, we do see Mario start with only 9 cards. But it is pretty early into the game, so maybe he only has 9 cards total up to this point. Or it could be that new cards aren't actually dealt until you run out cards entirely in your hand, or maybe not until you drop below a certain amount. And running with our card game idea, what if you're actually able to build different decks? After all, we can already tell that you'll be finding a lot of cards in the game. And if you really can only hold 10 at a time, that means there has to be some way of sorting them. And this could make for some pretty awesome strategic gameplay. For instance, if you're going up against a powerful boss, you may want a deck heavy on the defensive and health recovery cards like mushrooms. Whereas if you're taking on weaker enemies, you may want a deck that's more attack focused. And if Mario does indeed draw cards at some point during the battle, that means you have to account for random chance of what you might draw from your deck too, similar to playing a collectible card game like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon. Another possibility is that, perhaps instead of constructing decks, you simply build preset hands of 10 cards each. So maybe when you run out of cards in one hand, you can then choose another to draw from. And that might tie into our next point. Because another element of card games is that the cards don't self-destruct after you use them. Thank God too, because that would get pretty expensive. Instead, you discard them. And we're pretty sure that's going to be the case here too, at least to some degree. Because in the European footage, the paint actually drains out of the card after being used, which supports the idea that the card itself remains in Mario's possession. And that makes perfect sense given the fact that you have to paint the cards to use them, because this time, the paint is your primary limiting factor and not the cards themselves. So the only question is, where does the card go afterward? Does it go back into your deck like we suggested before? Or maybe it'll go right back into your hand? Which might mean that, instead of building decks, the gameplay could instead be focused on building specific hands, or loadouts if you will. Now in the footage, we only ever see a single card being used at a time. However, in this scene, we do see a second blank spot next to the first. Plus, we can see the first card slot has a number 1 written on it. So we think this might be this game's version of Sticker Star's Battle Spinner, in which you could spend coins to unlock additional attacks in the same turn. After all, the coin counter is right there on the gamepad, so it likely plays some role in battle. And if this is the case, then it's possible that, like in Sticker Star, you only attack enemies in front first. Unless, that is, you use a multiple card feature to attack other enemies beyond it. Again, like Sticker Star. Although we should mention that specific cards may allow you to attack more than one enemy at a time too. Like the special fan attacks and destroys all 3 enemies at once. Okay, so we know how you acquire cards. But what about paint? After all, we've seen Mario using a lot of paint, but never actually gaining any. Or so it seems. Because check out what happens when Mario takes out the Shy Guys here. you see that paint splashing around? At first, we thought it was coming from Mario's paint hammer as part of the attack, but if we slow it down, we can see it actually comes from the Shy Guys themselves separately. In fact, it actually drains the Shy Guys of their color entirely, leaving them as lifeless, colorless husks. So based on this, it seems that defeating enemies may refill your paint meter, similar to how enemies of Sticker Star would drop stickers. So defeating enemies might just be the key in obtaining enough paint to fill in the rest of the world, which is probably a good thing because you're going to need a lot of paint. At least if all the blank spots in town is anything to go by. And that could mean that you have to carefully balance how much paint you use in the world, while making sure you have enough left over to battle enemies and earn more. Although that does raise a question of what happens if you run out of paint entirely. There has to be some way to get more paint without fighting enemies. And sure enough, we think we found at least one way, but we'll touch on that shortly. Okay, so that covers it for the battle system, but let's back up a bit and take a look at how the game actually begins. And it would seem that Mario and the gang, including Peach and maybe the Toad here, arrive in Prism Island by boat, similar to how the Thousand Year Door began, but this time the town appears to be completely deserted. The piece of paper floating by here really does drive that point home. Oh, and in a nice touch, the gust of wind even causes Mario and his paper-thin gang to waver in the breeze. Now, even though the town does seem to be deserted, it doesn't seem like it'll stay that way for long, because some of those blank spots are actually in the shape of toads, which we've already seen can be brought back to life with Mario's trusty paint hammer. But that begs the question, where does Mario get that paint hammer from anyway? Well, we think this flying magic paint bucket might be the answer, who's almost certainly your guide partner throughout the game, like Kirsty and Sticker Star. Oh, and given the Toad's surprise at being alive, and the fact that Peach is nearby, he's probably the first of the Toads you'll revive. But there's something very interesting about this scene. But for that, let's take a look at the Japanese footage, which shows what happens presumably before that scene takes place, where a red slurp guy, yeah that's what they're called, uses his straw to suck up the Toad's colors. Which seems a little harsh, jeez! And considering they even hold that straw during battle, maybe they'll use it to suck away some of Mario's paint. And maybe they need it, considering the one here is looking a little faded at the bottom. Or maybe that shows how much health they have left. Oh, and we can't help but wonder that Toad might be the same one that Mario initially arrived to town with. But we're getting off track here, but there's something pretty crazy going on. Now when we first saw the flying magic bucket, it was a paper character like Mario and the others. But if you watch a little further into the Japanese footage, the camera pans out to reveal him in full 3D form. And since this clip takes place before the other scene, that means he only becomes a paper character later on. So what the heck's going on here? Is there some kind of magical source maybe that transforms 3D objects into paper ones? After all, Sticker Star did have something similar with the Thing objects and stickers. Then there's also the special fan connection from before, which comes complete with his own oddly realistic depiction of the world. At any rate, let's take a closer look at the town itself. And let's start in what appears to be the main courtyard where Mario first enters, as there's this odd structure in the middle. What is that? It almost looks like some kind of fountain, and it consists of 6 small empty circles that surround a larger one. But each of those 6 circles is a different color, being red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. Now, if you know your colors, then you probably know that those encompass the 3 primary colors, being red, blue, and yellow, as well as their secondary colors, as in the colors you get by combining any 2 of the previous ones, being green, orange, and violet. And all 6 of those circles have a pipe that connects them to the large middle one. How curious. So we're going to go out on a limb here and say that you'll probably have to find 6 differently colored objects to place in each of those 6 smaller circles. And given the fact that this island is called Prism Island, we have a feeling that the objects will be something that emits colored light, perhaps even a prism. So yeah, we're pretty sure we're looking at our new set of collectibles, which again, matches up with the 6 main collectibles in Sticker Star. And we're betting that once you've found them all, you'll bring them all back here where the colors will likely converge in the center and possibly reveal the final area in the game. Oh, and check this out. Even though the large circle in the middle is empty at first, a later scene reveals something inside. It almost looks like a trio of spotlights, which might support our idea from earlier. But what caused that thing to appear? Could this be the work of that magic flying bucket? Alright, that's enough about that multicolored fountain prism thing. So let's take a look at the rest of the courtyard. And first up is a large exit out back, which I'm pretty sure is how you'll leave town and go to the next area, given that we can see a forest beyond, as well as the fact that the voiceover pretty much explicitly stated just that. Next, do you remember that bush painting scene from earlier? That actually takes place directly above the exit. See it right below? And just above is what appears to be some kind of collectible star, which might be the item that you'll have to find in each level. But how do you get to it? Well, we can see what appears to be a staircase on the left that possibly leads right up to it, which we're guessing you'll access through the hallway right here. Except it's blocked by a roll of paper. But it won't always remain that way, because in a later scene, the path is now clear. And we think we know why. Do you see that spinning column on the left? Yep, by turning it on, it seems that I wound up the paper to get it out of the way. But what's powering it? Well, we have the answer to that too. Because, do you see that yellow band wrapped around that column that extends to the left? It seems to be the same band that connects to the water wheel in an entirely different section of town. Which means that this water wheel area is west of the main courtyard. And you can even see the main path that leads right back to it. Now of course, at this point, the water wheel isn't spinning, so clearly you'll have to activate it in some way, thereby opening the path. And while we're here on the west side, there's quite a few other interesting things to point out. So first up, there's a pretty typical looking save block right here. And just left of that is what's most likely an item shop, which suggests you'll be able to buy cards too on top of finding them around the world. And among the cards you can buy here are hammers, which we've seen before, as well as fire flowers and 1-ups. Next, we can see there's even more to town across a canal. So is there a bridge here that allows you to cross over it? Then there's a gate here that's blocking access to the staircase beyond, which leads to the water wheel. And possibly the hallway here that the rubber band extends through and connects all 3 sections of town. Moving on, there appears to be something up with the toad here. Let's zoom in and take a closer look. Oh my god, he has a hole in his head. Are you okay? Do you want to see a doctor or something? So I don't know what happened here. Maybe Mario didn't have enough paint to finish the job. Maybe that's why Mario hasn't filled in the other toads in this area too. Alright, and that wraps up for the west side. So let's head back to the courtyard for a few more details. Okay, now we've already established that this scene takes place a bit later on, because of the rotating column powered by the water wheel. But there's another important difference from earlier too, and that's the fact that the lamps now have decorative flags on them. So that's kinda neat, although we're not quite sure how they got there. Maybe the toads you've helped out so far slowly rebuild the town. Now, if we take a look at the second level again, we can see a red slurp guy hiding in a dark alley. Could this be the same one that sucked up the toad's colors earlier? If so, it seems like we caught him red-handed. Now just below, we can see a green toad holding a flag by the town's exit. But we're not quite sure what he's so excited about. Finally, there's a path right here that leads to the eastern side of town. And as for the east side, well, this is actually where the scene with the toad and the slurp guy takes place. To prove it, keep an eye on that barrel. It's the same barrel that appears in this scene, offering a better look at the area. And we can see that the wall on the right here appears to be the edge of town. And in case there was any doubt that this is the east side, keep an eye on the 2 buildings there. They're the same buildings as shown on the eastern side of town on the world map, which is just right of the large building found in the central square, and just west is the water wheel. So everything seems to match up, but we'll have more on the map soon. For now, let's get back to the east side. And here we can see Mario reveal a staircase by tugging on some tape. Yep, the very same tape from Sticker Star. Now in this case, or should we say staircase, you'll be able to use the stairs to reach the second level, which again spans all 3 sections of town. We can also see a couple of doors here that might lead inside, as well as another staircase in the back that leads to the top level. Alright, and with that it seems like we've seen every major area of town. But there might be at least one more, because the trailer also shows this scene of a dock, and that might be where Mario's boat pulls up to at the start of the game. Although we should mention that the pier in that clip doesn't quite match up with the one here, so there might be more to this area than what we can see so far. At any rate, there's not too much else going on here. I mean, there's a couple of signs you can probably read, then the staircase in the back that we're pretty sure leads into town. Particularly as the wall right here is the exact same color as the one behind Mario as he enters the main area. And that about covers it for the town itself. But there is one more interesting thing about this scene, because it's the only time in all of the footage that we see Mario painting something that's not blank. In this case, it creates a red splatter. But it seems like it's not the first time Mario's done this here, as there are a ton of splatter marks all over the ground. And even on the sign here, which does confirm that your paint won't just be limited to filling in blank areas. But this also raises some questions. Like, is there any reason to do this? And is there some way to clean up the paint when you're done? Or does it just reset when you leave the area? And finally, is Mario able to choose what color he uses? Or does it change randomly? Well, the wide array of colors here might hint at the latter, which by the way consists of the 6 primary and secondary colors, which again matches up with the vacant circles in town. Phew, and that finally covers it for all of the town scenes. But there are several other scenes in the direct that take place elsewhere, such as the very first scene that they showed off. And surprise, it's a grassy plain, although this one does have a distinctive red path that should guide you through the area. And it's got a pretty nice view of the ocean too, with a sailboat in the distance. Otherwise, there's really not too much going on in the immediate area, besides the 3 blocks here and the tree we already pointed out. Now just ahead is a ribbon that connects to another landmass that has 2 odd features on it. So if we zoom in here, we can see 2 odd red bulbs that glisten in the light. What are those? We think they might actually be globs of paint that Mario can collect, which works out well here given the fact that the main path is red, but needs some spots filled in. So between that and battles, that might be potentially 2 ways we know of to get paint. And that about covers it for this level. Or does it? Because there's another scene that actually reveals even more of it. Yep, we're talking about the Toad House here. And check this out. We can see the exact same red bulbs off in the distance, meaning this scene takes place just slightly earlier. Or should we say immediately before? Because that tree right there behind the house is the same one from the other scene. And there's a few interesting things to talk about in this clip. For one, do you see those pegs there? Yeah, they're gone a moment later when the screen fades away, which likely means Mario pounded them into the ground. Similarly, check out the flowers here. At first, there's nothing between them, but after the screen fade, a used brick appears, which we get an even better look at in the European version. So it looks like invisible blocks might be here as well. Either that, or maybe Mario did something else to make it appear, like maybe painted the nearby flowers or something. And speaking of blocks, we can tell that the brick here actually has something inside, because it's empty in the next scene. And by the way, we can't help but wonder Mario can use the blocks to reach the roof here. And finally, there's the house itself, which as soon as Mario fills in the missing paint, frees a bunch of Toads trapped inside. And in the extended European footage, we can see they're all extremely happy to be free, before they go running off. But where are they running off to? Well, we have a feeling they might be running back to town. Because if we take a look at the world map, this level is almost certainly Ruddy Road, which is the first level just outside of town. After all, the word ruddy refers to a healthy red color, and the level itself has a ruddy road, which matches up with what we see in the world map. So clearly the town's pretty close for this Toads to get to, and we imagine things might be a little livelier there the next time Mario decides to stop by. And while we're on the subject of Ruddy Road, the world map reveals a couple of more interesting details about it, and potentially all the other levels in the game. For one, we can see a rating for the amount of colorless spots Mario's restored. So yeah, filling in those areas is probably going to be pretty important, and it seems like the game will remember which ones you fill in. Next, there are two blank star icons above the level's name, which looks awfully similar to that star we pointed out back in town, which not only supports the idea of them being collectibles, but also that there might be several of them to find in some levels, which might also mean that they don't actually mark the end of a level like the ones the sticker star did. Okay, so that covers it for all of the scenes from the North American Direct, but the European one does reveal one more, and that's a battle scene in an area with a giant water wheel in the background. But since it is a battle, there isn't too much to glean from this, although it does seem like water will play a major role in this area. But check this out. If we go back to the world map, we can see that same water wheel just above. And sure enough, there's a level marker right next to it, and it's right in the water. So this might be the game's third level. And as it turns out, the world map gives quite a few hints as to what else is to come later in the game, as we can actually make out 9 level markers in total. And there appears to be some interesting landmarks by most of them. Of course, there's the 3 we've already mentioned, being the water wheel, Ruddy Road, and the town. But just left of the town is a level next to a warp pipe. And who knows where that might take you? And just left of that is another level marker next to what might be a nice tropical area, based on the palm tree and the beast chair nearby. Then to the south is a level marker next to some mountains, with what appears to be a gate there too, as well as some kind of stand just below. Then to the east is a level marker next to a train and some train tracks. And those tracks continue upward past some ruins to another level to the east, so maybe you can actually ride the train on the map, like the boat and sticker star. Finally, there's one more level just behind the ruins, in what might be some kind of desert or field. Okay, and that covers it for all the levels we can see so far. But it's clear that this map's probably going to be pretty expansive. After all, it is similar to Sticker Stars, and that game had almost 40 levels. But there is an interesting difference, and that's the fact that in Sticker Star, the levels are numbered like a typical Mario game, whereas this time that's not the case. As we can see, Ruddy Road has no number at all. So that might mean that the world's not quite as structured as Sticker Stars was, particularly as they were grouped together by theme in that game, like forest and desert, whereas that doesn't appear to be the case this time around. But interestingly, whereas Sticker Star offered branching paths from the get-go, well, sort of, it appears that there's only one place for Mario to go to after leaving town from the outset, and that's Ruddy Road. But we'd be very surprised if it doesn't open up later on, especially given the fact that some paths seem like potential dead ends, like the path to the northeast here. Finally, it looks like you can zoom in and out on the map with the L button. Second, we notice that the town icon seems to be blinking for some reason. Does that maybe indicate there's some reason to go back there? Alright, and we're finally almost done covering everything about this game, but there are still a few final details I wanted to point out. For one, all the footage so far appears to be from pretty early in the game, yet despite this, Mario has 50 HP, which is 30 more HP than he started Sticker Star with. So either you start with a lot more in this game, or maybe this was just a debug setting the developers used for the trailer. Next, let's take one more look at the fan that the special card spawns. Because for one, this scene is pretty freaking awesome looking, though oddly out of place with the rest of the game. So could there be a greater significance to it, as with a 3D Magic Bucket? But more importantly, the Japanese version offers an extended look at this scene. Check it out! Pretty cool, huh? And did you catch that the entire thing is a reference to the opening of 2001: A Space Odyssey? What with the sun peeking up over the Earth, and the unmistakable music? Yeah, that's pretty freaking awesome. You might say I'm a pretty big fan of that. Finally, and I mean it this time, that planet not only looks awfully Earth-like, but it is the Earth. In fact, that appears to be Japan directly below, which of course is where Nintendo is based. Yeah, that's pretty neat too. And with that, we're finally done covering everything we could dig up on Paper Mario Color Splash. But as usual, let us know if we missed anything by posting in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stay tuned to Game Explain for more on this game and other things gaming as well.